Alright everyone, today we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is something else I deal with daily, nightly, all the time. I went to nih.gov. I believe that's National Institute Mental Health or something like that. You could probably read this on your own, but I'm going to read it just so we don't miss anything. So let's start with post-traumatic stress disorder. Overview. PTSD is a disorder that develops in some people who have experienced a shocking, scary, or dangerous event. It is natural to feel afraid during and after a traumatic situation. Fear triggers many split-second changes in the body to help defend against danger or to avoid it. The fight or flight response is a typical reaction meant to protect a person from harm. Nearly everyone will experience a range of reactions after trauma, yet most people recover from initial symptoms naturally. Those who continue to experience problems may be diagnosed with PTSD. People who have PTSD may feel stressed or frightened even when they are not in danger. Signs and symptoms. Not every traumatized person develops ongoing chronic or even short-term acute PTSD. Not everyone with PTSD has been through a dangerous event. Some experiences, like the sudden unexpected death of a loved one, can also cause PTSD. Symptoms usually begin early, within 3 months of the traumatic incident, but sometimes they begin years afterward. Symptoms must last more than a month and be severe enough to interfere with the relationships or work to be considered PTSD. The course of illness varies. Some people recover within 6 months, while others have symptoms that last much longer. In some people, the condition becomes chronic. A doctor who has experience helping people with mental illnesses, such as psychiatrists or psychologists, can diagnose PTSD. To be diagnosed with PTSD, an adult must have all of the following for at least 1 month. At least one re-experiencing symptom, at least one avoidance symptom, at least 2 arousal and reactivity symptoms, at least 2 cognition and mood symptoms. Re-experiencing symptoms include flashbacks, reliving the trauma over and over, including physical symptoms like a racing heart or sweating, bad dreams, frightening thoughts. Re-experiencing symptoms may cause problems in a person's everyday routine. The symptoms can start from the person's own thoughts and feelings. Words, objects, or situations that are reminders of the event can also trigger re-experiencing symptoms. Avoidance symptoms include staying away from places, events, or objects that are reminders of the traumatic experience. Avoiding thoughts or feelings related to the traumatic experience or event. Things that remind a person of the traumatic event can trigger avoidance symptoms. These symptoms may cause a person to change his or her personal routine. For example, after a bad car accident, a person who usually drives may avoid driving or riding in a car. Arousal and reactivity symptoms include being easily startled, feeling tense or on edge, having difficulty sleeping, having angry outbursts. Arousal symptoms are usually constant. Instead of being triggered by things that remind one of the traumatic events, these symptoms can make the person feel stressed and angry. They may make it hard to do daily tasks such as sleeping, eating, or concentrating. Cognition and mood symptoms include trouble remembering key features of the traumatic event, negative thoughts about oneself or the world, distorted feelings like guilt or blame, loss of interest in enjoyable activities. Cognition and mood symptoms can begin or worsen after the traumatic event, but are not due to injury or substance use. These symptoms can make the person feel alienated or detached from friends or family. It is natural to have some of these symptoms after a dangerous event. Sometimes people have very serious symptoms that go away after weeks. This, called acute stress disorder or ASD, when the symptoms last more than a month, seriously affect one's ability to function and are not due to substance use, medical illness, or anything except the event itself. They might be PTSD. Some people with PTSD don't show any symptoms for weeks or months. PTSD is often accompanied by depression, substance abuse, or one or more of other anxiety disorders. Okay, so that's your definitions. So I wanted to give a start there and then go from that to my experience. So my experience with PTSD is reoccurring events that happened since I was about 2 or 3 years old, and they increased with intensity, and they were basically so overwhelming that it would stop everything I was doing. I couldn't focus. I was immediately in fear. Adrenaline would rush. Fight or flight survival mode would kick in. And it could be something as simple as hearing my stepdad's truck, or a truck that sounded like my stepdad's truck, but I always knew my stepdad's truck. It was very clear because there was a lot of pipes on it, because he was a pipe fitter. And so there was a lot of pipes, steel pipes or iron pipes on the truck, and so when he hit a bump or he'd turn a corner, there'd be a little bit of a jostling sound of the pipes kind of rubbing against each other or lightly hitting each other. And I remember the engine, I remember the sound of the engine, everything. And so I would hear him coming home from 3-4 blocks away, sometimes more, depending on the day. And I immediately had to go into a mode where the chance of me being harmed was the least likely. So I looked around the house really quick. I made sure that if there was anything sticking out that wasn't cleaned up or dusted or washed or fixed or whatever, I would make sure to quickly grab it, put it somewhere where he wouldn't see it, you know, in a drawer, under a bed, somewhere, and then get to putting it where it needs to go at a later point. And he was two different people. When my mom was around, he wouldn't do this kind of stuff. I mean, he'd want to discipline me, or he'd swat me and stuff like that, but he wouldn't do anything too outlandish in front of my mom. And when my mom wasn't around, and she wasn't around a lot because she was working full-time and then going to school full-time, so the only time I saw my mom, she would come in at night and give me a kiss on the forehead or whatever and tell me she loves me and tuck me in, and she'd go to bed, which was the usual, about the only time I saw her. So I saw her about a minute or two a day, and then sometimes more on the weekends. And most of the time when I wasn't in school, I'd be at home with my stepdad, and he liked to do really cruel things, you know. I mean, and now I'm an adult, so I know the difference between right and wrong more, and what's cruel and what's unfair and unusual punishment versus what's disciplinary and what's expected of a father. I have my own children. But, you know, things like being told to clean the driveway, and then him finding a few really small rocks under a tire of one of the vehicles, which it's easy for rocks and pebbles to get stuck under a tire against concrete or asphalt. He would make a big deal out of it. He's like, "What's that down there?" And he'd hit me in the back of the head, or he'd push me down, or he's like, "If I see that again, you know, I'm going to do something terrible and awful to you." And when you're a child, this is really hard on you, because you feel like you know that this injurious situation is about to occur. You know that no matter what you do, you're going to get in trouble. And all you're doing every day is you're trying to limit the amount of pain and suffering you will endure from a grown man, from a grown adult. And so I grew up spending minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, trying to limit the amount of pain I would receive. I knew the pain was going to come. I knew I would get slapped, hit, kicked, pushed, beat, teased, molested, and a variety of other things. That covers most of them, though. I knew that was going to happen, and so I was just trying to figure out a way all the time to limit those things from happening. And so as I grew up, I started doing the same thing with the world around me. I started trying to limit the amount of fights I got in. I tried to limit the amount of pain that I inflicted upon other people so that when they, because I always assumed people were going to get around to hurting me, whenever we got into a situation with friends or people in the neighborhood where there was an altercation, I would beat them in a fight just enough that so I could get away, so I can get out of the situation, because I just wanted to limit the amount of pain that was inflicted. And then hopefully next time we got together, and if they actually won a fight or something, then I wasn't beaten to the point where, you know, I couldn't recover. And so that's just kind of how I grew up. You know, I had a lot of weird experiences growing up. I had a lot of fears. I was scared of the dark from a very young age. I still am scared of the dark. I think it's because at night was when people that I knew or people in my home, around me, whatever, in the neighborhood, committed the most, I think, the most violent crime. I know that my stepdad would get away with more at night. If he could hit me at night outside and nobody could see it. So I think that's part of it. I also think that he liked to scare me a lot, so at night he'd look in my window and be like, booga booga booga, and do some kind of weird face at night in my bedroom window, and so I kind of got scared from that, and so there's a lot of fight or flight going on, and it makes it really hard to live. It makes it really hard to just function in society, because I have triggers. I have a lot of triggers, and I'm working on those triggers not affecting me as much, but I have triggers. There's certain words and certain tones of words. The way a word is said to me can make me completely fly off the handle. One of the words is dumb motherfucker, dumb ass. If you had half a brain, you'd be a genius. I didn't know they stacked shit, shit that high. Like, he'd ask me how tall I am, and he'd say, I didn't know they stacked shit that high. I mean, that's not stuff you're supposed to tell a kid. I don't tell my kids that shit. Like, I don't have my kids like measure themselves or measure my kids against the wall and be like, oh, you're 4'8". I didn't know they stacked shit that high. That shit is wrong. And when you're doing that to a child, along with all the other stuff I listed, it's like I'm a dog in a corner pissing all over itself and shaking. That's how I feel a lot. And so I've tried everything to alleviate this. I've tried hardcore drugs. I've tried more mild drugs like marijuana and shrooms, things like that. I've tried to be a drinker. I've tried gambling. I've tried therapy. I've tried counseling. I've tried massage. I've tried acupuncture, going for walks, going to the beach, riding my bike. I've tried everything that I can, and I still do that. I still try everything that I can, because I know that I've come to the conclusion that I would love for PTSD to vanish, but I have never had a break from PTSD since I was 4 or 5, maybe 6 years old is when it started kicking in. So I have very aggressive PTSD. It's debilitating. There's some days where I can't get myself to do anything. And also, I did a video on bipolar disorder, so there's some of that going on too. But there's some days that I just can't get myself to do anything, and that people look at me a certain way or touch me a certain way or interact with me a certain way, I just immediately freeze up and clam up and shut off, and I'm just like stuck in my own little private prison, my own little small jail cell. And so I do everything I can to keep that from turning into a real jail cell, or a mental hospital, where they call it being committed for a long duration. So PTSD is real. It's debilitating. It makes it almost impossible to keep an actual job, like employment with someone. Not just because it's hard to show up to work every day. that's not the problem. The problem is too is that sometimes you get so far out of your mind that you're going to be looking for therapies and solutions elsewhere besides what's allowed in your analysis. So, you know, you might end up having a dirty UA or something because of you're trying to get through some post-traumatic stress without, you know, doing anything too drastic. Anyway, so I hope that helps you guys understand me, understand post-traumatic stress disorder, and I just wanted to give you guys a little info and share what I found on post-traumatic stress disorder. So have a good day or night wherever in the world you are, and thank you for spending time with me. Bye.